CEO turnover is the highest it's ever been in 2024.
Vanetta did a piece on it the other day. It's actually a topic that I really like.
Okay.
Because I have long argued that it is ridiculous the speed at which public boards act to replace CEOs that are ineffective and inefficient is ridiculous. Whether it has to do with some form of regulations, whether it has to do with some normal board conformity, whether it has to do with just size of the contracts, the guarantees, whatever it is. The fact that CEO turnover was relatively so slow compared to every other part of a working firm, it never made any sense to me. Why do we tolerate bad CEOs when we don't tolerate bad network engineers, or we don't tolerate, bad CTOs,
bad customer service professionals?
Yeah, bad CFOs, whatever it is. How is it that we feel compelled to give the CEOs, enough time to prove to us what we already know is that they're ineffective and just not smart enough for this particular role, or not good enough for the role?
And do you have an answer to that question?
Well, I think
why do you think CEOs are last longer, basically?
Because I think boards are more afraid of. I think we live in a very litigious society, and I think boards are more concerned about image and about litigation than they are about obligation. And as a board member, you have an obligation to serve the shareholders, and you have a responsibility to the shareholders, not to the CEO. And so your job is to support the CEO in what they want to do. But if they're not effective in what they want to do, then your job is to change the CEO. It's very difficult to build a firm.
Is that because boards are captured by the CEOs, a la Elon Musk and Tesla?
Well, it's because a lot of times CEOs are chosen by the board, and then they have to, they don't get to pick their own children. They very rarely, if you're a founder, you get to pick your board. But if you're a hired gun CEO, you don't get to pick your board. And the board's been around longer than the CEO. So you don't really get to stack you don't get to stack it with friendly board members.
So you're saying that there's the board being in the pocket of the CEO is not the reason the CEO keeps his job or her job too long. So then what is the reason?
I think it's part litigation risk, and it's part image, and then it's part just the boards. By definition, boards are relatively inept because you're asking somebody to be on a board. Yeah, I don't know if activists are given more credit than they deserve. I think the good thing about activists is that in many cases, they recognize really bad CEOs and they pounce on the lameness of bad CEOs. They are able to pounce. I think the bad thing about activists, because I've had to deal with activist investors before, is a lot of times they just create controversy for the sole reason to shake things up, because they think that's the playbook. Like, just shake things up, because if you shake things up, things will happen, which is kind of stupid. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan.
Which is kind of stupid.
Yeah,
I understand.
Well, I'm not a huge fan of activists. I'm not a giant fan of activist investors. I do like. Yeah, I'm just gonna say I'm not a fan of activist investors in general. But
no, what? But you were gonna say no. What do you like?
If it was up to me, I would require that board members own a piece of the company, that they have to buy a certain amount of stock, and that they're paid in equity only, so that they have skin in the game. One of the things I like about private equity, most private equity firms, is that they require all the partners in every deal to invest in each deal, so that every partner has a piece of the deal, so that they have a vested interest in the deal. Unfortunately, on most boards, that's not a requirement. And I think that should be a requirement. I also think that we have to stop, we have to stop this whole thing of, hey, we gave this person, 3 years, we gave this person 5 years, let's give them their time to make this thing work. I think that's kind of ridiculous. I almost think that within a matter of months, did we make a good hire or not? And, we can keep a professional coach in sports, a manager, a football coach, whoever it is, we can give them the boot in 6 games if we don't think they're competent. And for some reason, we have to hold a CEO for 6 years because we know they're not competent.
So how long? What's the correct time window? What's the minimum time window to find out whether a CEO is doing a good job?
In a perfect world,
2 years, 1 year, 3 years.
In a perfect world, it would be very much like a parliamentary system where as soon, in the U.S., we elect a president, we're stuck with that person for 4 years. It doesn't matter. There's no question at the end of Biden's 4 years, he's non-existent. He doesn't exist. All right. This country's just running on fumes. In a parliamentary system, whether it's like France or UK or whatever it is, as soon as you lose confidence, you're gone. And I don't understand.
So you would like to you would use like a no confidence structure where like you got the job, you're the CEO, but basically, whatever, a quorum, some sort of a gaggle of board members could submit a no confidence vote to the shareholders at any time.
Of course.
That'd be beautiful.
It would be, wouldn't it?
But isn't that possible now or no? Not really. It's not in the culture.
It's definitely not in the culture, and definitely not. I've never even, there's been shareholder revolts and stuff like that, but I've never heard of a situation where, you put out a non-confidence.
Well, that's also why they invented the poison pill, right? Because it used to be that you could basically organize a revolt by just accumulating enough shares. And
yes.
even if no one all this, and then they created the poison pill and blah 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 blah. But I love your no confidence structure.
Well, I think that should be.
I think the U.S. government should also have that. By the way,
I think that it would be very tough in our system, But it's the argument for term limits. There's a lot of arguments in there, but I guess, and it's why why you can only have, I guess
why you can only have what.
I was going to say why you could only be in a certain office for a certain amount of time, or why there's a certain why we do have some limits, at least on the presidency, but we should have it on different branches as well, because we don't have a no confidence rule. If you have a no confidence thing, you don't have to have any of that stuff, because as soon as you lose confidence, boom, you're out. Like it works better because then you don't have to worry about impeachment or anything like that. You just you led an insurrection, no confidence, you're gone. It's over. Like that's simple stuff. That makes it.
Or even like, who was there? Was that one British prime minister lasted 3 weeks because she tanked the bond market? I can't remember her name.
Exactly.
Like she was done in 3 weeks, up and down. She's in and out.
Well, there was no confidence in this from the start in that one in her. But I guess my whole point is to this discussion, which I think is actually really a good discussion, is that the fact that we have the highest turnover rate with CEOs means that there has been a change in the mentality on a board level to finally get boards to start paying attention and essentially saying, hey, you know what? The market's up a lot and our stock is lagging. We have a lousy CEO. It could be for reasons, with respect to whatever the industry is, things like that. But in general, if you're an underperformer and if you're not keeping up with the Joneses and whatever else it is, you have to make a change. If you're the CEO, you get paid the big bucks for a reason. And you have to put on your big boy pants because, you want to get paid the big bucks, then you got to take the risk. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
NFL coaches don't take the job going, well, I'm going to be here for 15 years. They go, I'm taking the job because I know that statistically I'm probably going to be here for 3 years. But in the pure case of a miracle, and I make it 10, 12, 14 years, it's going to be amazing. But they get it.
But that would be historical. That would be an unprecedented historical event. So do you look at the increased number of new CEOs in 2024 as an indication of something happening that's favorable in regard to higher levels of accountability or higher degrees of confidence in
Sure. That's why the market's at record highs. The market's at record highs because we have started to we've lost our tolerance for incompetence, which is why the US markets are so strong relative to the rest of the world, because we can actually make change. You try to make change in other places around the world is extremely difficult. And other countries are starting to realize this. They just rolled back some really stupid rules, tax rules with respect to trading and liquid markets in Germany. They're going to start doing this all over. I mean, finally, the rest of the world is starting to understand why the American markets attract all the liquidity. And it's because we've created a favorable marketplace for raising capital and for exiting and everything else. And everybody else is looking around going, why can't we do this? And the reason is because you got stupid ass rules and you can't fire anybody. And you know what? We're starting to we're setting a good precedent. We just have to, listen, sometimes there's factors that you can't control as a CEO, but other times there are reasons to make a change, and companies should not hesitate. And it's a good thing when they do. There was a bunch of companies this week, big companies, changed their CEO. They're finally starting to learn, hey, you know what? We don't have to stay with somebody that's not getting it done.
It's interesting because it's sort of like the instinct to fire people that are lower in the company. There's an instinct to fire fast at the mid and lower levels, and then there's an instinct to fire slow at the top. And it feels like what you're talking about is an emergence of a culture of firing fast at the top, not just in the middle and at the bottom.
Yeah.
The concern, I think, with firing fast at the top is because it's a more public action, is that it creates the perception of instability at the company if it's a publicly traded company. That they don't want to have the perception of a new CEO every year. They don't want to seem like they're the Italian government, where it's a new prime minister every year.
I don't think that we are ready. I don't think investors and analysts and US markets are ready for a new CEO every year because there's a learning curve, but the other side to that is I do think that the market appreciates the fact that we're not accepting of incompetence anymore. So I think there's kind of a happy place in between. And I think we're getting there, and it's actually a good sign. So I guess from my perspective, we're heading in the right direction, and that is one of the best signs that I've seen in a long time. Is the high turnover rate for CEOs. We are no longer going to just blindly accept, inefficient, incompetent, lazy, CEOs that don't have vision, that don't take control, that don't change things up.